In 1879, the USS Jeannette departed from San Francisco under the command of George Washington DeLong in search of the fabled open polar sea, the existence of which was a product of a now disproven theory that an ice-free ocean surrounded the North Pole. After 2 months, the Jeannette became surrounded by ice, and nearly 2 years later, after moving only 250 miles from where they'd initially been trapped and surviving a hull breach, on June 11, 1881, the Jeannette was freed from that ice, only to be crushed and sunk the next day. DeLong led his crew of 33 men across the ice that had pierced their ship toward the Siberian coast, pulling 3 small boats behind them. After a 3-month trek, the crew used those boats to sail for the Asian continent, but were quickly separated. DeLong's party made landfall, but his men were in poor health, and they quickly ran out of food. After a grueling 2 more months, DeLong's final journal entry came on October 30th, 1881. Noting the death of another in his crew, as had been done consistently over the prior 10 days. Of the 33 who set out on the Jeannette, only 13 survived the failed expedition to find a fabled sea. Commander DeLong died of starvation. So you didn't click on the wrong video. I'm Denny, and today I'm talking about how Baratie made me fall in love with One Piece. Hit it! If you're familiar with this channel and the avalanche of One Piece videos I've made recently, I'm sure you've made the connection that I love it. But recently, I've started reading the manga, going back to where this journey began, and it has me thinking about what made me fall in love with this series in the first place. That's no mystery to me. It was Baratie, the arc where the plucky crew travels to a sea restaurant and meets their future cook. The reason I love this arc, and I still get embarrassingly emotional when I rewatch it, is a testament to the storytelling. But I'm not here to talk about what makes Baratie such a great arc, nor am I here to try and convince anyone of anything. I've just been thinking a lot lately about how this series came to mean so much to me. I'm a latecomer to the scripture of Oda. I started watching One Piece right at the beginning of 2021. I had finished Naruto Shippuden months earlier, but was still in a Swag Kage YouTube hole, and I ended up finding a video featuring Roger's Base talking about One Piece. That, combined with a severe anime hole left in my heart after just finishing Hunter x Hunter, led me to start this pirate series, more out of boredom than genuine interest. But I liked it. I thought the backstory on Gold Roger was fascinating, I thought Kobe and Luffy were kind of annoying, but Zoro was cool, and the flashback to Shanks is what hooked me into staying around a little longer. Orange Town was fun, Syrup Village almost lost me, then I got to Baratie. Then I got to this specific moment, and I was enthralled. The episode ended, and I'd never been so quick to start the next one. While Mihawk's display of power is what had me come back, Zoro's pledge and Mihawk's encouragement of both Zoro and Luffy to continue to pursue their goals is what made something inside me click. January 2021 was a pretty bleak time in my life, as I'm sure it was for many of you. It had nearly been a full year of coronavirus lockdowns, it was the dead of winter, and there was a tension in the air across the country that still hadn't quite dissolved since the 2020 election. I'm certain I was luckier than most. I was able to live with my parents, and although I was partially furloughed from a job that I hated, I was still bringing in some money with enough free time to really give this YouTube thing a shot. But I was sad. It felt like my life was stuck, like any aspiration I'd ever had was put on hold, like I was treading water while the sea just kept getting rougher with no land in sight. I tend to internalize things, not to talk about things, which, when I say that now, sounds funny given the name of this channel. But I'm a pretty private person, and when something is truly bothering me, I never really say anything. I usually bunker down and try to occupy myself with anything else. At first, all One Piece was to me was that anything else. It's safe to say I didn't have a lot going on at that time, and that I felt pretty rudderless and jaded. I felt as though I was failing. I don't even know at what, but I felt like I was doing the wrong thing. Like I was falling in slow motion, and that it was only a matter of time before the world would suddenly catch up to me and my teeth would crash against the floor. When Zoro promised that he'd never be defeated again was the first time I cried while watching One Piece, and it wouldn't be the last time for this arc. Pirate Hunter Zoro, the best swordsman in the East Blue, came face to face with his goal and was unable to achieve it. Looking back on this, I appreciate it even more. Not because of the events that come after, but because of the simplicity of the moment. Zoro doesn't change at all when faced with his failure. It's Mihawk that changes. It's the world around the characters that changes. It's clear from the start that Zoro was going to lose this fight. Mihawk bursts into the series with unthinkable power. Something everyone believes to be impossible occurs before their eyes, and Zoro looks anxious, realizing he would face the man he longed to defeat far earlier than he expected. But there's never any doubt in him. He's going to fight. The crowd even realizes who Zoro is and hypes him up, but Mihawk pulls out the smallest blade he has as a sign of, if not disrespect, then a complete lack of it. He uses this to stop Zoro's trademark technique with no effort. Zoro was defeated in this moment, and yet he kept fighting. Gearing up to unleash another technique, Mihawk stabs him in the chest, but Zoro doesn't back away. He tells Mihawk he would rather die than face defeat. That if he backs away even an inch from his goal, it would feel as though he had broken the promises he made. That step backward would mark his failure. Because of this, Mihawk changed his attitude. He defeats Zoro by cutting him across the chest with the greatest sword in his possession. Baratie is all about pursuing your dreams, about pursuing happiness, no matter how unrealistic the goal may seem. The setting itself is Zeph's dream come to life. The overarching conflict of the arc is to protect that dream. Zoro is destroyed by Mihawk, but rather than wallowing in defeat, he immediately promises his captain that it will never happen again. His dream remains unchanged. This arc doesn't just make Luffy's dream of being king of the pirates seem far-fetched, but puts him in the role of the chore boy, the useless helper around the restaurant, the lowest person on the totem pole. Not one time does anyone refer to Luffy by name during his fight with Don Krieg, the self-proclaimed ruler of the East Blue and commander of 5,000 men. Luffy is just the idiot chore boy who ends up decimating the mighty king in a battle over their shared dream. This arc is framed around the pursuit of impossible goals, but centers around Sanji, who he is at this moment in time, and how he has buried his own dreams. When Sanji first hears about Zoro's goal to face Mihawk in the Grand Line, he calls him a fool. After watching Zoro lose, he wonders why he didn't give up when defeat was so obvious. He screams out, "It's easy, abandon your stupid dream." During Luffy's fight against Krieg, Sanji doesn't think Luffy stands a chance, but Zeph tells him to watch closely. He tells Sanji that Luffy's greatest strength is grit, his inability to give up on his dream, even for a second. At the end, Zeph says he knows a fool who isn't pursuing his own dream for no good reason at all. It's through witnessing both Zoro and Luffy's inability to back down, their near psychotic commitment to achieving their dreams, that frees Sanji from the cage he built for himself with good intentions. Sanji's internal conflict in this arc isn't going from someone who hates dreams and thinks they're bad to becoming a real dreamer. It's more complicated than that. He's been a real dreamer all along, but because he felt he owed a debt that could never be repaid, he buried his dreams. The arc that Sanji goes through is coming to accept that it's okay to be a bit selfish. It's okay to cast aside the commitments he constructed for himself out of love to pursue his own dreams and make himself fulfilled. That's something I needed to hear at the time. I've never had big, lofty dreams. I've never known what I wanted to do with my life, and whenever someone asked me that throughout high school and college, I would grow frustrated. I knew plenty of things I didn't want to do, and sure, I had dreams when I was a kid. As I grew up, I wanted to be a writer. I even dreamed of making movies. But those dreams were ones that I knew I couldn't achieve, let alone make a living from. So I settled. I think that's the story of young adulthood for a lot of people, continuing to settle over and over until the dreams of your childhood, even the dreams of yourself from less than a decade ago, seem more and more foolish. At least, that's how I felt. I think it's extremely important that Sanji's dream is the most childlike out of the crews, and it's presented as the least likely. Zoro wants to be the strongest swordsman. That's measurable. Usopp wants to become a man of the sea. That's an internal shift that can happen over time. Luffy wants to find the One Piece, which is the most similar to Sanji's dream, except we meet other characters who pursue the same goal. The One Piece is famous in this world, and it's what the story is named after. The All Blue is presented as a fairy tale, a children's story that not a single soul believes is real, except for Sanji and Zeph. His dream is so intangible that it rarely comes up in the story. It's not something the crew actively pursues, it's not even something Sanji ever mentions. Yet, it's always there, lingering in the background. But why make Sanji's dream something like this? Outside of one fish in Logtown, Oda noticeably has avoided seeding proof or even hints that the All Blue exists. The only real reason the audience is given to believe it may exist is because Zeph also believes in the All Blue, despite never finding it himself. This story isn't just telling us that Sanji goes from not pursuing his dream to pursuing it, and that's that. Instead, his dream is presented as far more unobtainable than the others. Like a child going on a long voyage to the North Pole to find Santa Claus, he is chasing a fairy tale, but he still decides to pursue it. Sanji's story in this arc is to break out of the malaise he'd constructed, the excuses he'd piled up to block himself from moving forward. Baratie is about taking control of your destiny and pursuing what makes you happy, no matter how foolish it may be. It's about how the pursuit of something is what's important, and how clinging onto something you truly believe in and never letting go can take you on a worthwhile adventure. Sanji's goal, unlike everyone else's, may actually never be achieved, and that would be okay because he gave the pursuit of it everything he had. The other two times I cried while watching this arc were the reveal that Zeph had sacrificed his foot in order to save Sanji because they shared the same dream, and when Sanji broke down and told Zeph how grateful he was to him for all he'd done before setting off to pursue that dream. When I think back on Baratie, the first things that pop into my head aren't Don Krieg or Nami escaping with the Mary. It's the 3 moments that made me cry. 3 moments that are all about pursuing your dreams no matter how insurmountable they are. It sounds childish and basic. Chase your dreams and never give up feels like something a parent in a made-for-TV movie would tell their troubled teenager. But that isn't what One Piece is saying. Within Baratie, there's an explicit promise that although the dream may be unobtainable, the journey will be worth it anyway. And that's the last thing I want to talk about in this video. The romanticism that I clung onto in this arc without even realizing it. As I said, while I was watching this arc tucked away above my parents' garage, I was sad. Not crying every day sad, not yelling or cursing the world sad, but like a cool filter had wrapped itself around me, almost barely noticeable anymore. Like this is just how the world was, and I had to accept that if I wanted to keep living in it. And I'm not gonna say watching Baratie suddenly cured me of my, I'd argue, reasonable internalized crisis. As much as I love this series, I can't give it that much credit. But I will say, Baratie is when I started to feel warm watching One Piece. That promise of a worthwhile journey, even if it ends in failure for some, had me hooked. Later on, the concept of romanticism would be verbalized by Mont Blanc Cricket, and I always appreciated that moment because it identified an element about the series that I had felt since Baratie, but could not verbalize on my own. This story about a rubber boy clobbering his way through monster after monster alongside his friends came to represent something hopeful. In One Piece, the pursuit of wild dreams was a true adventure. But to me, in the real world, even the thought of that had become a childish act. Reality was a place where no matter how hard you tried, eventually you had to settle. Or worse yet, fail. In the beginning of this video, I told you that story about George Washington DeLong and the Jeannette expedition. A real-world story that has some odd echoes to elements from Baratie. It's a story about a man who had dreams of finding a fabled sea, but ended up starving to death in the cold instead, having achieved nothing. That interpretation of events that I just presented you with is bleak. But there is a different way to view how things unfolded. About 6 years before the Jeannette would depart from San Francisco, DeLong made his first trip to the Arctic. He was 28 years old, 1 year older than I am today. Before that experience, he had cryptically described the Greenland coast to his wife as a dreary land of desolation. I hope I may never find myself cast away in such a perfectly God-forsaken place. But upon returning from this voyage, his wife described that DeLong's outlook had changed, stating that now, the polar virus was in his blood and would not let him rest. After this, DeLong spent 5 years trying to organize the expedition that would cost him his life. It became his greatest passion. Fairly soon after the Jeannette set off, the US government would publish findings disproving the existence of the open polar sea. DeLong would never learn that the fabled ocean he'd been searching for was made up, a fool's dream. But I wonder what his reaction would have been if he had heard it. Would he have believed them? Would that have stopped him? Of course, it's tragic that dozens of men died in this journey, but I can't help but feel there's something romantic about the tragedy of the USS Jeannette. Did DeLong die for nothing? As he was suffering from starvation on the Siberian coast, did he feel that he had wasted years of his life? I'm not so sure about that. He pursued a dream knowing there was a possibility he would fail. He lived for something, and not enough of us can say that. I find it's a comforting thought to imagine DeLong's spirit traveling on, continuing to lead the search for a dream that had captured his heart. A short arc about fighting cooks in a silly pirate anime helped me to change my perspective, and it's a lens I prefer to see the world through. It might not seem like much, but that's how One Piece changed me, and that's how Baratie made me fall in love with One Piece. Baratie is about a lot of different things. There's a battle between human kindness and human cruelty disguised as cunning. There is commentary about home, guilt, and expressions of love. There's a lot more that I could say about Baratie, as I think it's a truly excellent story and an early showcase of what One Piece was capable of, but the most important part of the arc to me was the promise that it made. Whether you achieve your dreams or not, it's better to try rather than waste your life pretending you don't have any at all. Thank you so much for watching this video, and special thank you to my patrons. I hope you all were able to get some enjoyment out of this. Please take care of yourselves, my next video won't be as personal, and until the next time, I'll shut up.